Hello everyone, welcome to Talking News for Friday 27th of January. My name is Howard.
And mine is Pauline.
Here's the society news then for today, Friday 27th of January. On Tuesday there will be 2 coffee mornings held in aid of the society. The first at West White, end of the line cafe from 10:30am to 12pm, and Bembridge, the Cloisters, 10:15am to 12pm. Please go along and support these if you're able. On Tuesday again, the Dolphin Swim Group will meet at the Waterside Pool in Ryde. Swimming starts at 8pm, and the group has sole use of the pool for this session. Lifeguards are present while the group is swimming. If you wish to join, please call the society first to advise us of your level of swimming ability. Wednesday, the society coffee morning will be held this coming Wednesday, that's the 1st of February. Come and join us for a cup of coffee and a chat. Why not bring a friend along as well, as the coffee mornings are open to all. The Society Coffee Morning will be joined by the Macular Degeneration Group for their monthly meeting. Again on Wednesday, the Owls will be meeting at 2pm in Millbrook House. The speaker for this week's meeting is Peter Boffin, and he'll be talking about his time in television. The group lasts approximately 45 minutes, which is then followed by tea or coffee and cake. On Thursday, the Knitters and Natterers will be meeting at Millbrook House, 10:30am till 2pm. There's help for knitting at all levels, coffee and a chat, and readers who will entertain you in the afternoon. Please note transport may be available to some of the groups, but please call the society first on 522205.
Any other news? Scaffolding news. Please find below a list of known footway obstructions for works, including scaffolding or hoarding. We're unable to include end dates as many are extended on a week-by-week basis. Also included are tables and chairs permits that have been issued in the past week. In the Bay area, 11A St John's Road, Sandown, Napoleon's Landing, Esplanade, Sandown, 2A York Road, Sandown, Trouville Hotel, Esplanade, Sandown, European Court, Melville Street Side, Sandown. New tables and chairs permit at Lookout Cafe, 12 Esplanade, Sandown. In the Cowes area, the Watch House Lane, Cowes, 59 St Mary's Road, Cowes, Development Site Castle Street, East Cowes, GKN Clarence Road, East Cowes, due up 27th of January, 7 York Street, Cowes, due up 27th of January. Hoardings at 272 to 283 Arctic Road, Cowes. In the Newport area, Nippert Court, West Street, Newport. Diva Hairdressing, Ace Shoe Repairs, vacant premises all at 91 to 94 Pyle Street in Newport. At the Newport Minster in St Thomas's Square, Newport. At 35 New Street, Newport. Watch Bell House, Lugley Street, Newport. And there are hoardings all round McDonald's, 93 to 94 St James's Street, Newport. In the Ryde area, 32 Melville Street, Ryde, 26 Nelson Street, Ryde, the Hair Centre, 13 to 14 High Street, Ryde, the Anchorage, Seafield Road, Seaview, Scaffield is on Rope Walk, 19 George Street, Ryde, Monsoon Indian Dining at 132 High Street, Ryde. In the West White area, 129B School Green Road, Freshwater, and finally in the South White, 2 Trinity Road, Ventnor, and Spa Shop, 1 West Street, Wroxall. This week's In Touch. In Touch in this week's episode, Peter White is joined by RNIB's Jeff Phimister, Disability Employment Advisor Caroline Stansfield, and Professor Roy Sainsbury to discuss the implication of the government's Green Paper on work, health and disability. Peter asked Jeff and Roy about the RNIB statistic, claiming that 1 in 4 blind people of working age are in employment. Mike Lambert's latest column outlines his experience of the changing workplace, where he feels there is now an emphasis on quantity rather than quality, which puts blind people at a disadvantage.
Now to the Isle of Wight County Press for today, Friday 27th of January 2017. 2 main headlines, one to do with planning developments and another to do with Isle of Wight politicians uniting in tribute to Maurice Barton. 2 key developments were turned down by planners this week, despite warnings their actions could cost the island thousands of pounds. Half of Red Funnel's application to expand its East Cowes marshalling yard was thrown out and the Isle of Wight Council Planning Committee refused 80 homes on fields at Ryde's Westridge Farm. The lengthy debates on these applications meant there was no time left at Tuesday's meeting to discuss the Carisbrooke College rebuild scheme. Less than a year after losing a planning appeal over the Blanchards development at Brystone, when councillors sided with objectors and not their own officers, they voted down 2 major applications officers had recommended for approval. The Blanchards' decision cost the authority tens of thousands in legal costs of the appeal. At that time, Councillor Bob Blizzard, who now chairs the planning committee, told colleagues they should be personally liable for the costs bill. The latest decision sparked a stern warning from top planning officer Wendy Pereira, who called in both decisions. She told councillors their decisions had placed the authority at significant risk, and she would be spelling out their significance at a special meeting of the committee on February 28th, which would revisit both applications. Officers had warned there were no sustainable grounds within the planning blueprint, the island plan, to refuse Red Funnel permission. But councillors turned down the lorry trailer park part of the scheme because of loss of important marine industrial space through demolition of the Redux shed behind Dover Road. Councillors then refused an equally controversial application for 80 homes at Westridge Farm in Ryde. They did so on access road and highways grounds, despite Island Roads telling them it would adequately serve the new development. Both applications had attracted significant objections from public and councillors said they had a duty to take that into account. Councillor Matthew Price, who spoke against Westridge, said, "That's what I'm here for, to represent the public, and if the island plan no longer gives us the tools to resist inappropriate development, we need to both vote against that development and change the plan." After the decisions, Councillor Blizzard said, "I would expect councillors to listen to what our officers have to say and take that into account when making decisions. Decisions need to be sustainable on appeal, otherwise it can cost the Isle of Wight Council money. Perhaps councillors need more training." When the island plan was brought in, it was always intended that it should not be a stationary document, but it would be adapted and added to take account of a change. But with the reductions at County Hall, there simply hasn't been the staff to make that happen. To vote against officer recommendations is not the way to change the plan.
Tributes have been paid to former Isle of Wight Council leader Maurice Barton OBE, who has died at the age of 75. Councillor Barton of Rosetta Drive, East Cowes, died at home last Friday with his family, including his wife Marcia, at his bedside. He held the record as the longest-serving leader of any council in the country. Island MP Andrew Turner said, "Many people do not realise there is a great deal that unites those of us in the political world, even when we do not share political views. Maurice was as consummate a political operator as I ever met, and that didn't stop after he left public office." Councillor Dave Stewart, Isle of Wight Council leader, said, "Following his long tenure as council leader, he continued to be a source of guidance and support to many others working in public life. I found his views and advice informative and thought-provoking." Island Independence Group leader Councillor Julia Baker-Smith said, "I send our sincerest condolences to Maurice's family. Maurice was an exceptional politician and advocate for the Isle of Wight. He will be greatly missed. I have known Maurice since I was a child, and he inspired me to become a councillor. I am forever grateful to him for his support and mentorship, and am so very sad to have lost a friend." Labour Group leader Councillor Jeff Lumley said, "All other Isle of Wight council leaders are measured against him and all fail. We were never councillors together, but he always had a supportive word for me after I was elected." Nicholas Belfit, Isle of Wight Liberal Democrats chairman, sent the party's condolences. "We would thank Maurice for his many years of hard work as councillor and member of the party. He will be remembered fondly for his support, commitment and work he accomplished." Councillor Charles Chapman, Isle of Wight Council chairman, said Councillor Barton was both a friend and valued work colleague during his time with the authority. "The island has lost a great advocate and supporter who took us from the Isle of Wight County Council to a unitary authority," he said. County Press editor Alan Marriott, who was a colleague of Councillor Barton for many years, of the near 40 years he worked at the paper, said, "I knew Maurice as a passionate politician who always had the good of the island at heart. I will always remember him as one of the good guys. He will be remembered fondly by his former colleagues at the County Press." Tributes were also recorded before his death in a soon-to-be-published book, Morris Barton, Mr. Isle of Wight, which he wrote with his friend and colleague, chartered surveyor and development consultant Christopher Scott. In it, former party leader Paddy Lord Ashdown says, "Morris wears his politics as his passion, like Liberals should, on his sleeve. He fights for his beliefs with tenacity and passion, but he has always responded to the views of those he disagrees with."
Freezing fog and icy roads caused travel chaos across the island this week. On 3 consecutive days, the Met Office issued yellow warnings advising people to allow extra time for journeys. The poor conditions were said to have contributed to a number of collisions on the roads and disrupted cross-Solent travel. Whitelink, Hover Travel and Red Funnel faced delays, with some services being suspended. A 2-car collision closed Merston Road between Arreton and Rookley, and an accident involving 6 vehicles happened on Firestone Copse near Haven Street. Southern Vectis' bus routes were also disrupted, with drivers refusing to use Whitepit Lane on Monday until it had been treated, which it was later that day. Wednesday's conditions saw Island Line suspend trains between Ryde Esplanade and Ryde Pierhead until 8 a.m.
And as we've just said, the thick fog was to blame for a 6-vehicle incident near Haven Street. Derek Holm, a steel fabricator from Ryde, was driving to work on Monday morning around 7:20 a.m. when he came off the road at Firestone Copse and got stuck in a muddy verge. The 43-year-old called his boss for help and got out of the van to try to push it back onto the road. With thick fog surrounding him, he was unable to see his hand in front of his face, but suddenly heard a car screeching. 2 vehicles managed to swerve around him and his van, and the driver stopped to help. As the team prepared to push, Darren heard another vehicle coming and shouted for everyone to run as the car ploughed into his van. The impact threw the van into the air and it travelled 3 feet before crashing down onto a chevron, causing significant damage. Darren's boss then arrived to help, but another passing car smashed into his van. It was very eerie, and all I could hear was banging and crashing, he said. It was a surreal experience and pretty frightening.
A man charged with killing an Isle of Wight prison officer has denied manslaughter. Michael John Hudson, 32, of no fixed address, appeared at Winchester Crown Court on Monday. He pleaded not guilty to manslaughter in relation to the death of Nick Medlin. Mr. Medlin, 57, of South Street, Ventnor, died after an incident outside the Rose Inn, Ventnor, in the early hours of Christmas Day. The trial will take place on June the 26th.
The candidate for May's Isle of Wight council election has apologised to the family of Councillor Colin Richards after election leaflets were mistakenly delivered through their doors just days after his death. Claire Mosdell, who is standing as a Conservative in the Newchurch ward, told the county press she would not dream of doing anything so callous intentionally after a calendar containing an election leaflet was posted through the letterbox of Councillor Richards' daughter, Amy Green, and other members of the family on Wednesday, urging them to vote for her. Ms Mosdell, who lives in Shanklin, said she was unaware the long-serving councillor died over the weekend, and the leaflets and calendar were meant to have been delivered last week on her behalf. However, Mrs Green declined to accept the apology, saying there was no way Ms Mosdell or the girl charged with delivering the material could not have known Councillor Richards had died. Mrs Green said the first thing she should have done on Monday morning was to contact the delivery person and put a hold on delivering these leaflets. I don't believe she did not know the leaflets were going out. What kind of politician would have no idea? Ms Mosdell, whose father, former councillor Brian Mosdell, died in 2008, said the leaflets and calendar had been printed in December and were scheduled to be delivered in January. She said, I've taken flowers and a card around to the family to apologise. I'm really upset as my dad died of cancer. It is absolutely terrible. I don't know what happened as I've not got hold of the girl who delivered the leaflet. I just thought, my God, when I heard what had happened. I thought they'd gone out last week.
Vandalism at changing rooms used by Sandown Football Club left the team struggling to play home fixtures. After extensive damage was caused to the facilities on the Sandown Bay Academy site recently, the club's first team had to postpone an Island League Division 2 fixture with Northwood earlier this month. Vandals had broken the lock to the changing room door and damaged 3 showers and put 2 basketball-sized holes in a stud wall, which in turn had damaged the electrics, Sandown FC secretary Bob Gray said. The Academy's Enterprise Trust, AET, which controls Sandown Bay Academy, said the damage had been confined to the changing rooms and reported to the school a fortnight ago. Mr. Gray, who inspected the damage, was told the bad news the day before the game. He said, "I was told kids had gone on the rampage and trashed the place. We store our equipment there. Although it was thrown about a bit, it wasn't damaged, thankfully. I'm shocked and disgusted by what happened. It's nothing less than mindless stupidity. I don't know what went through their minds at the time. What could they possibly gain by doing it?" Sandown FC players had offered to fix the changing rooms, said Mr. Gray. The nearby Hurricanes Rugby Club came to the rescue on Saturday by allowing use of its changing rooms for a match against Carisbrooke. In a statement, an AET spokesman said, "Although we have no evidence which indicates who caused the damage, we very much regret the inconvenience this has created among the community. We're pleased to report repairs are being carried out and the changing rooms will be fully operational by this coming weekend."
And vandals have targeted Sandown's public toilets. The Yaveland car park toilets, run by the Town Council, were damaged between 6 p.m. on Monday and 5:30 a.m. on Tuesday. Vandals set fire to a toilet basin and smashed panels beneath the hand dryers in the men's facilities. Town Clerk Marion Cook said, "It's mindless vandalism. It's a shame the people of Sandown are now having to pay for this out of their rates because of such actions. I can't comprehend why they do it."
The heroism of an Isle of Wight policeman who risked his life to save a woman who jumped into the Solent has been recognised with one of the most prestigious honours, the Queen's Gallantry Medal. PC Nathan Lucy was on duty in Cowes in April 2014 when he was alerted to a vulnerable woman who was in the water and being swept out to sea by the current. After she ignored repeated calls to swim towards him, PC Lucy leapt into the water and swam out to her. She kicked him and pushed him under the water, but eventually he was able to grab hold of her and swim to a life ring. The woman continued to resist, but then went very still with her eyes closed. PC Lucy pushed her head higher out of the water, which again caused him to go under. Despite this, he retained hold of her until they were finally pulled into the jetty, where she was lifted out and given immediate, life-saving treatment before taken to hospital, said a Hampshire police spokesman. Now based in Aldershot, PC Lucy said, "It's a great honour to receive this award. I feel very proud to have my work recognised at this level." Hampshire Police Federation Chairman John Apter said, "This is one of the most prestigious honours a police officer can receive, and I am immensely proud PC Lucy has been recognised in this way." Without a second thought for his own safety, and going well beyond what was expected of him, he did what was needed to save that woman's life. He certainly deserves the medal.
The seizure of fake goods worth £30,000 could result in jail for a Cowes woman who ran a fraudulent online enterprise. Jolene Michelle Alank admitted 10 offences under the Trademarks Act, 3 of selling fake goods and another 7 of possessing them in 2015. The 24-year-old of Pelham Road came to the attention of Isle of Wight Council Trading Standards officers following a raid on a property in Cowes on September 2nd, 2015. Alank ran an online fashion enterprise selling goods such as handbags, purses and scarves with fake designer labels, including Chanel, Louis Vuitton, Givenchy and Prada, which she acquired through a contact in Turkey. As part of a large-scale operation against fraudsters, officers discovered 1,835 fake items worth £30,000, said Rory Fitzgerald, prosecuting on behalf of the Isle of Wight Council at the Isle of Wight Magistrates Court on Monday. The Council's Trading Standards team discovered Alank had made around £20,000 profit from the sale of the counterfeit goods. Representing Alank, Barry Arnett said his client was in over her head with her enterprise. Magistrates ordered a report on Alank to consider all sentencing options, including imprisonment, and bailed her to reappear for sentencing at the Isle of Wight Crown Court on February the 24th.
Music festival fans have been warned about the risks of buying tickets from disreputable sources after a teenager was jailed for 21 months for a festival ticket scam that left hundreds out of pocket. Benjamin Highland Ward, 19, of Westfield Avenue, South Saltine, East Sussex, who pleaded guilty to 9 counts of fraud by false representation, will serve his sentence in a young offenders institution. He took around £60,000 from about 375 people who were hoping to get cheap tickets for the Isle of Wight event. Investigator Amber Forshaw-Bryant said, "This has been a long and complex investigation involving a large number of people, and we'd like to thank those involved for their patience and assistance. We would also like to remind people about the risks involved by purchasing tickets through sources that aren't reputable, and that if the offer is too good to be true, the likelihood is it is."
The Isle of Wight Council has moved to minimise delay over deciding whether Carisbrooke College can press ahead with a multi-million-pound development plan. On Tuesday, the authority's planning committee ran out of time to debate the application for a new 600-place 2- and 3-storey building to replace some of the existing buildings, the majority of which date back to the 60s. If a special meeting had not been arranged, it would have taken another 6 weeks for a decision, so the authority announced a special meeting would be held on Thursday. Decision on Red Funnels Marshalling Yard application and 80 homes for Westridge Farm at Ryde had taken nearly 4 hours when the plug was pulled on further debate under the council's standing orders. The Carisbrooke development is part of the Education Funding Agency's Priority Schools Building Programme. The plan reduces Carisbrooke's potential capacity from the current level of more than 1,000 students. Classroom, a new sports hall, activity and drama studios and music and media spaces are incorporated. Comments on the unimaginative design and transport and construction traffic challenges in the nearby residential area were registered by Newport Parish Council. It had been recommended for approval by planning officers.
A clash over how key committees are chaired erupted this week in the wake of the Tories taking control of the Isle of Wight Council. New Ireland Independence leader Councillor Julia Baker-Smith accused Conservative and UKIP members of bulldozing a vote not to appoint a new scrutiny chairman in a bid to give them a free rein at County Hall. She was backed by sole Lib Dem member Councillor Reg Barry, who said a number of other key committees have now been left without chairmanship since the vote last week. "We do not agree with the Conservative UKIP alliance view these can be left vacant for 3 months. The committees undertake important statutory functions, including dealing with matters of audit and licensing, which simply cannot look after themselves." But Council leader, Councillor Dave Stewart, hit back, appearing to threaten to bring to light surprising information about one of the possible candidates for the scrutiny role that had been covered up and raised serious ethical issues. "I will be happy to explain that situation at the next full council meeting, should Councillor Baker-Smith find that helpful," he said. Labour's Councillor Jeff Lumley said the move sounded like some sort of blackmail, and if there was information Councillor Stewart believed should be in the public domain, he should reveal it now rather than threatening to do it if the person is nominated as scrutiny chair. Councillor Stewart denied the blackmail suggestion and said he was due to meet Councillor Baker-Smith to discuss the situation yesterday, that's Thursday, to establish a position with which all parties were comfortable. In a statement issued separately this week, he said, "I greatly value constructive and challenging scrutiny, but it is right we get it right, not get it rushed." The Scrutiny Committee would have been more than able to elect its own chair for any meetings before the next full council meeting, when this could have been debated properly in a measured and considered fashion, rather than Councillor Baker-Smith seeking to score cheap political points on such an important issue.
So County Hall has a new look, following last week's election of Tory Councillor Dave Stewart as leader. The decision-making body includes 3 independent members and a UKIP councillor, alongside 5 Conservatives, including Councillor Stewart and his deputy, Councillor Stuart Hutchinson. Councillor Stewart said, "This cross-party team uphold my ambitions to provide professional leadership for the council in a caretaking capacity up to the local council elections in May. Over the next few weeks, our focus will be upon the need to set and agree a robust council budget for 2017-18, which will be considered by the full council on February the 22nd. The new posts are Leader and Executive Member for Strategy and Community Partnerships and Public Protection, Councillor Dave Stewart, Conservative; Deputy Leader and Executive Member for Corporate Resources, Councillor Stuart Hutchinson, Conservative; Children's Services, Councillor Chris Whitehouse, Conservative; Tourism and Business Development, including Public Realm, Councillor Wayne Whittle, Conservative; Transport and Infrastructure, including car parking, Councillor Ian Ward, Conservative; Adult Social Care and Public Health, Councillor Richard Priest, Independent Members Group; Major Contracts Management, Councillor John Gilby, Independent Members Group; Regeneration Councillor Julia Jones-Evans Independent Members Group, Planning, Housing and Homelessness Councillor Darryl Pitcher UKIP.
The war of words between Labour and UKIP members of the Isle of Wight Council has continued. Labour Group Leader Councillor Jeff Lumley was asked to leave an ill-tempered full council meeting last week, during which he branded UKIP councillors Graham Perks and Darryl Pitcher neo-fascists. Councillor Pitcher, the new executive member for Planning, Housing and Homelessness, said Councillor Lumley's histrionics brings shame on the Labour Party and shows why they're not fit to govern either locally or nationally. He was about as anti-democratic as it's possible to get without being outright Stalinist. In not allowing other members or the chairman to even say one word without shouting them down shows the weakness of any argument he may have had. He added, Councillor Perks was understandably riled, as his father was a tank commander fighting for the freedom of Britain and our allies during the war. Graham cares about others, whereas Councillor Lumley thinks only of his own self-entitlement. But Councillor Lumley defended his actions. My protests were at the appalling and consistently incompetent chairman who consistently favoured the new ruling alliance during debates, refused to clarify legitimate points of order, refused to answer serious inquiries, and proposed my expulsion from the meeting when he heard my own proposal of a vote of no confidence. I was expelled by the new anti-libertarian Tory UKIP alliance that is running County Hall, with fair-minded Isle of Wight independents and the one Lib Dem voting against, he said. He added, Councillor Pitcher's remarks, belittling what people do in a free and democratic society when they have no other way of having their voice heard, protest marches, etc., is entirely representative of a member of the UKIP political party that would undoubtedly repress those freedoms if they ever achieved power, freedoms my ancestors also contributed to defending. Isle of Wight Council Chairman, Councillor Charles Chapman, declined to comment.
So plans for a super council have been dropped after council leaders and MPs from the Isle of Wight, Portsmouth and Southampton could not agree on key areas of the deal. Politicians met on Wednesday to discuss the devolution plans, which would have seen more power and money going from the government to combined authorities. The most contentious part of the plans was the concept of a mayor, Councillor Dave Stewart, leader of the Isle of Wight Council, said. The Isle of Wight Council narrowly voted against the deal in October last year, but the executive at the time pushed on with the plans. With the deal, £30 million a year for 30 years was expected to be provided by the government for regeneration, but some councillors doubted it would materialise and others said it was unlikely to boost existing struggling services. Councillor Stewart refuted claims the Conservatives had refused to work with the other authorities and said they already had a good relationship. It was clear and acknowledged at the meeting the Solent deal in its current form wouldn't be going ahead, Councillor Stewart said. The arrangements that were being proposed meant it was possible for two of the three participants to outvote the other, and our great concern was the Isle of Wight not being seen as a major player, and we might have been outvoted. That's just not right for the island. Councillor Stewart said he met Portsmouth City Council leader Donna Jones on Thursday to discuss future partnerships. I think people should see there are lots of possibilities, and now the government might be more flexible and not be tied necessarily to the mayoral requirement, he said. It's important to remember none of this would have solved our financial situation. It was all about future investment potential. Councillor Julia Baker-Smith, leader of the Island Independence Group, said, extremely disappointed doesn't begin to describe the feeling after so much hard work by island people to fight for additional funding. The council had voted for and agreed to hold a referendum on the subject. In derailing the devolution and combined authority strategy, they have denied the public the opportunity to vote on any proposed deal.
Assaults on NHS staff on the Isle of Wight have fallen. The Isle of Wight NHS Trust said there had been a 9% drop in the number of physical attacks on its staff during 2015-16 compared with the previous year. The Trust said 80 of the 82 assaults were the result of the medical condition of the patient involved. Connie Wendes, Assistant Director responsible for Health and Safety and Security, said it was encouraging to see the fall given the tremendous pressure on services and a national rise in assaults. But she said the Trust was not complacent. Any attack against NHS staff should be and is taken extremely seriously. The Trust doesn't tolerate violent or abusive behaviour towards its staff, and each incident will be reported and acted on. 2 criminal offences prosecuted by the Trust this year were successful in ensuring there is a zero tolerance to criminal activity. She added, "We're working hard to improve care plans, particularly for those living with dementia, to try and reduce the circumstances that result in attacks." In a bid to reduce the number of attacks on staff, more than 1,500 have had training in skills including conflict resolution, breakaway and physical intervention.
2 independent lifeboat charities are celebrating a government cash windfall this week. Ride Inshore Lifeboat received £30,095 and Freshwater Independent Lifeboat £22,816 as part of nearly £1 million released by the Department of Transport for water rescue charities across the country. A.D. Farrell, Ride Inshore Lifeboat chairman, dubbed the grant a godsend. The money will go towards a new launch vehicle and trailer for the boat, 5 life jackets and 6 radios with emergency GPS tracking. "It will be money well spent," said Mr. Farrell. "It's all very good news and much appreciated." Freshwater Independent Lifeboat will be putting its share towards the cost of a jet ski. The lifeboat crew hopes the new craft will allow a faster response to casualties, as there is no lifeguarding service from St Catherine's Lighthouse to the Needles. Currently, the station covers the area using a 9.5 m lifeboat and a D-class rib. Rod Adams, principal fundraiser, who helped secure the cash, said, "I think the grant will go further toward providing a search and rescue service and a faster response. It will help to bring our equipment into the 21st century, and it will, hopefully, encourage more volunteers." One of the station's youngest volunteers, Tom Stafford, 20, said, "I think the money for the jet ski is wonderful. It will give the lifeboat station even more capability to help people all along the south-west side of the island. I hope it will encourage more young people to join us, because what we need is about 4 or 5 people around the age of 18 to join the crew."
Islanders can have their say on plans to scrap the walk-in service during the day at St Mary's Hospital. A public consultation was launched on Wednesday to discuss removing the 3 full-time GP and 2 nurse practitioner shifts who work at the hospital between 8 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. from April 1st. Walk-in access between 8 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. would remain available at weekends. Patients need to call 111, see a pharmacist, or book an appointment with a community GP rather than just turn up at the urgent care service. The consultation runs until February 22nd. Have your say at www.smartsurvey.co.uk/s/urgent care survey.
Heart screening for Ride teens. Teenagers at Ride Academy will have their hearts screened in memory of 2 islanders who died of undiagnosed heart conditions. Andrew Q has been fundraising for cardiac risk in the young since the death of his wife Gemma Q in 2011. He's teamed up with Paul Stevens and Jill Kennelly, whose son Andrew Stevens died in 2006, to raise awareness on the island. The charity will be heading to the school next Thursday and Friday to screen and educate the pupils. The 2 families are urging parents to sign their children, who must be 14 or older, up to the screening, and 112 of the 200 spaces have been filled so far. To register your child, visit www.rideacademy.my.org and click on the news section.
Council tax discounts on property standing empty or undergoing repairs have been axed. It's hoped the move, which will net the Isle of Wight Council £715,000, will encourage owners to bring properties back into use. Councillors unanimously supported the plans at last Wednesday's council meeting. Councillor Julia Baker-Smith, the executive member for housing, before the island independents were ousted by the Conservatives, said, "We're keen to get empty properties back into use as quickly as possible. They're needed by island people, including homeless people." Previously, empty properties were eligible for a 100% council tax discount for 3 months, while properties undergoing major or structural repairs were eligible for a 75% discount.
Home Office immigration officers arrested a restaurant worker last Friday. The 30-year-old Bangladeshi man was arrested after Home Office immigration officers visited Eastern Eye High Street, Sandown. He was found to have outstayed his visa, according to a Home Office spokeswoman. The operation was supported by Hampshire Police and also led to the arrest of an Albanian man working at Somerton Car Wash, as previously reported.
Pregnant women and new mothers are being encouraged to sign up their children for a new asthma study. The Breathing Together study will be led by the team at the David Hyde Asthma and Allergy Centre at St Mary's Hospital. It will investigate the development of asthma in young children and hopefully lead to new preventative approaches. Professor Graham Roberts, consultant paediatrician in allergy and respiratory medicine, is leading the Isle of Wight part of the study. Wheeze in preschool children is one of the few common problems in children we do not really understand, he said. Even when nobody in the family has asthma, a small child may start wheezing, so we're hoping everyone will help us with this study. This new knowledge will hopefully lead to the development of new approaches to preventing breathing problems and treating them in small children. Island researchers are joining colleagues from across the UK to investigate the problem. The study will follow a group of 1,000 newborns until they're 3 years old to see if differences in the way the lining of their lungs work, how their immune system functions, and what bugs live on their skin causes them to develop wheeze. The study team will collect information about the child as well as some samples in the first 10 days after they're born and again when they're 1 and 3 years old. The team will contact the family once a month by email. Parking and some travel costs can be reimbursed if participants visit the centre. For more information, contact the centre on 530786 or 07710 229794 or email iowstudy@iow.nhs.uk.
An Island teenager who has been given the all clear after finishing cancer treatment is calling on Islanders to back a campaign to support the charity that helped him. In the build-up to World Cancer Day next Saturday, February the 4th, Ryan Kimber, 17 of Newport, is sharing his story to encourage people to raise funds and awareness for Click Sargent, the UK's leading cancer charity for children and young people. Ryan, who was just 3 months into a new course at Isle of Wight College, studying Level 3 BTEC engineering, had to put his life on hold after the shock of being diagnosed with a medulloblastoma tumour in January last year. Following an operation to the tumour, Ryan had 6 weeks of radiotherapy and 4 months of high-dose chemotherapy, and thankfully he has now been given the all-clear. During his treatment in Southampton, Ryan's family had support from a Click Sargent social worker, and his family stayed at Click Haven, one of the charity's home from homes where families can stay for free. Ryan said, "When I was diagnosed with cancer, it was a massive shock. My Click Sargent social worker, Kate, has been a massive help. I'd be lost without her. I can ask her anything, and she helped my family with all the financial issues too. Having Click Haven was so important because it meant my family and friends could stay close. So even though I was far away from home, I didn't feel isolated."
Agreement has been reached between the Isle of Wight Council and contractor Island Roads over one element left out in the PFI contract signed between the two organisations, a meeting heard. Isle of Wight Council Principal Transport Officer Stuart Chandler told a meeting of the Isle of Wight Bus and Rail Users Group that Island Roads would now maintain and clean all bus shelters, and we're getting to the point of resolving the issue of bus stop maintenance, which was not included in the contract, Mr Chandler told Saturday's meeting. We've had a review of all bus stop poles, and I believe we're at the point of resolving who maintains them. The two issues were among several overlooked when the multi-million-pound deal was signed between the council and its contractor.
Totland's Piers owner has appealed to the Isle of Wight Council to discuss a sensible solution to restore it to its former glory. Clint Wellington of Farnham Developments Limited bought the pier in 2010 and has planning permission to build a 2-storey house at the end of the pier with the former cafe replaced by another 2-storey building which would house a cafe, retail unit and flat upstairs. The problem is the cost of raising the adjoining car park 700 millimetres, which must include an extension to the seawall as required by planners. Mr Wellington said this was too costly to make the project viable. He wants talks with the planning department and is looking for dispensation to be considered, given for this area to flood there would need to be the perfect storm linked to the highest tidal conditions, and this may not happen for 200 years. He said, "I'm desperate to find a solution. If not, the pier will stay the way it is until there is some sort of resale value. It is just not viable to undertake a huge engineering project on a third party's land to lift the promenade, car park and seawall defences 700 millimetres to accommodate a 200-year flood risk. Even if that happened, we would have hours of notice to evacuate the property, the 10-metre distance to the steps directly opposite the cafe entrance. Mr Wellington said all the components, including lattice beams out to the pier head and all the Green Heart timber joists shipped from Guyana, had been manufactured and were still in storage. Considerable underwater work with piling had been completed. Mr Wellington said he had been in contact with Totland Councillor John Howe, who is also on the island's planning committee. I just want to get this sorted, and I am more than happy to have a site visit with Councillor Howe and a planning official. Councillor Howe said, I've spoken to the planning officers and asked them if there is any way we can deal with this. I'm happy to meet Mr Wellington, discuss his concerns and work with him to try and find a solution.
It was a packed room in God's Providence House, Newport, for the island's first ever Death Cafe. Organised by retired librarian Nick Wilde, 73, last Wednesday's Death Cafe was not the morbid affair one might expect. Death Cafe was founded in 2011 as a global non-profit social franchise to increase awareness of death with a view to helping people make the most of their finite lives. With around 4,000 death cafes having been held in Britain, it's clear people want to discuss the issue. Perhaps the greatest appeal of the Death Cafe is its sense of distance, an aspect which those attending the inaugural meeting agreed allowed them more freedom. I found when I raised the concern, my family accused me of being gloomy, said one man. Others in the room conceded that in many ways it was easier to discuss the matter with strangers. Contrary to expectations, no one attending the cafe was at death's door, and there was a wide range of beliefs and backgrounds. Death is the one thing we all have in common, said one person. We don't talk about it, and we always avoid using the term death, added another. During these cafes, death is very much on the menu, and discussion flows freely, ranging from funerals and the afterlife to how children are taught about death. Another attendee said, It's always good to talk about important matters with like-minded people. I enjoyed it. Attendees shared a feeling society had become too sheltered from death, and we were ill-equipped to handle it. For some, there was a single moment when it sank in, such as losing a peer. For others, it's always been there, and simply talking about it helps take out some of the sting. Nick plans to continue running a monthly death cafe on the island, free and open to all. The next meeting will be at the same venue on February 15th at 2:30 p.m.
A £30,000 refurbishment project has been completed on pools at West White Sports and Community Centre in Freshwater. Divers were brought in to clean and regrout the main pool, which is the deepest on the island, as part of a month-long programme of maintenance and upgrading works. Centre manager Claire Griffin said, The ongoing maintenance of the swimming pools is a huge job, especially when you consider the main pool was built 40 years ago. We had to shut the pools before Christmas in order to carry out the work. We know this was an inconvenience for our regular swimmers, but we hope they will see it has been worthwhile. The pools are the biggest financial expenditure for the charity, and we do all we can to keep costs down. The new equipment will be much more efficient. We even had staff who have normally been lifeguarding helping out with the painting. Other work included the learner pool being drained and a new disinfection system installed, while the showers in the swimming pool changing rooms have also been upgraded, and many of the roof stills in the pool area repainted. Meanwhile, the centre is celebrating having won a £5,000 grant from the Aviva Community Fund. The funding will be used to run sessions for children with disabilities in sports such as wheelchair, basketball or rugby, frame football, blind football and seated volleyball. Community support for the project was an essential criteria, and only those with the most votes were put through to the judging panel. Claire said the Isle of Wight community really got behind the project, and we received more than 3,400 votes. This funding will enable us to employ a coach. We will then be guided by the young people and their families as to the types of sports that they would like us to offer.
So that ends the first part of today's Talking News, and it's goodbye. Best wishes from Howard.
And from Pauline.
Hello, this is Sonara. We're reading the second half of the Talking News of the County Press.
And I'm Stephen. I'll also be reading. Hello. We'll start with a letter, and the first letter is from Rosemary Goodfellow of Shanklin, a mark of respect by a true gent. I was travelling through Shanklin on Monday, January the 16th with other family members as part of a cortege. The hearse was carrying my mother, who had lived a full 100 years and had been a wonderful lady. We passed a man wearing a high-vis jacket who stopped and removed his cap. He very likely had not known who the hearse was carrying, but that small gesture, more common in a bygone age, meant a great deal to us on such a difficult day. If he is reading this, I would like to thank him and let him know how much we appreciated that mark of respect.
And from Jane Luff of Bembridge, well done. Much negativity has been written and said about the NHS on the island. I would just like to say that last Friday I had cause to contact the 111 service. I was promptly, professionally and sympathetically treated on the phone and kept updated as to the time it would take the ambulance to arrive. The paramedic who treated me was superb, not only showing me professionalism, but also empathy and humour. I can't fault the service in any way, and would like to say a big thank you to all involved.
Now a letter from Rodney Archer of Chale Green. Why didn't Bus Firm consult? I attended the public meeting of the Isle of Wight Bus and Rail Users Group in Newport last Saturday. I was appalled at the news from the new General Manager of Southern Vectis that they had decided, for commercial reasons and without any prior consultation with the Isle of Wight Council or the Isle of Wight Bus Users Group, to severely restrict the forthcoming summer bus service lifelines from Sandown, Lake, Whitwell, Knighton, Chale and Chilliton, services 6 and 8. As the angry meeting progressed, it felt like déjà vu. Looking back to 50 years ago, I sat on a similar top tables in similar local halls as a young British rail management trainee trying to defend Dr. Beeching's strategy of closing the local rail line, again for commercial reasons. Now sitting on the other side as one of the affected residents, I know how it must have felt. If one of the country's most reputable bus operators feels it has the right to make such draconian decisions, then any franchise rail operator can do the same, and there can be no long-term prospect for the future of our rail line. My experience of working on both sides of rail and road organisations has led me to believe that neither nationalisation nor privatisation is right. The best from both types of business is needed. Government development of community interest companies seems to be a step in the right direction.
Warm welcome on Red Jets. This is a letter from Patricia Reddy of Newport. I would like to thank the Red Funnel staff who clearly worked extra shifts so the Red Jet could double up and run on time on this week's foggy Tuesday morning, and for letting us aboard early to wait in the warm.
And now a letter from A. Reader of Newport. Congestion charge, no way to get elected. I read with amazement the news about parking in the county press of the 20th of the 1st of 17. Does the Labour Party really consider a congestion charge for Newport a strategy that will get them elected? Having lived and worked in London, now that is congestion, Newport has less of a problem than getting past IKEA in Southampton on a Sunday. Given that the shops in Newport seem to be either empty or charity shops, one wonders how many people travelling into Newport are actually shoppers, or whether they are passing through, given no other way to get around the island. Consider someone leaving Cowes for, say, East Cowes or Ryde, or someone leaving Yarmouth for Ryde or East Cowes. Without passing through Newport, explain please. Given council strategies in the past, such as making Trafalgar Road and Whitepit Lane one way, and blocking off Orchard Street, one wonders whether these are strategic at all, or just done to enable certain people to get home quicker. But fear not, for we shall soon have the answer to Newport's traffic problems. A park and ride so beloved of planners and strategic consultants can be sited on the soon-to-be vacant Newport football ground. People can park there and walk to Asda, and then we won't need to come into Newport at all. Is that the sort of strategy these people in high places want? What is really wanted and needed is a railway line that links Ryde to Newport and Cowes. But that, of course, was not required by previous people that controlled this island, and even now, bits are still being removed. Time to get serious, but stop blaming the hard-pressed motorist. Congestion charge? Do me a favour.
Little money goes long way, from Joe Hardy, Bishop of Shanklin. In the Newport Parish Council report in County Press 13th of January, Councillor Jeff Lumley seems to imply it is commendable that the parish precept remains the same as last year. One could argue instead it's a symptom of a tired and timid council which is reluctant to rock the boat prior to the elections in May. A reluctance to challenge the status quo indicates a council that is neither dynamic nor proactive in its efforts to improve the lives of the people it represents. In fact, a rise to 50 pence per week in the precept, currently 38.4 pence, would equate to only £26 a year in total, negligible against the £1,500 Band D council tax people are already having to pay. Significant changes could be effected with this modest increase, such as improving the state of the lanes and paths that we have learnt do not come under the remit of island roads. Or resources, for example, a skateboard park, could be made available for the young people, who apparently had nothing better to do than repeatedly trash the Christmas tree. Or someone could be employed to transform the cemetery that Councillor Lumley describes as in disgraceful condition to create a haven for wildlife and a green space for the people living nearby.
Now a letter from W.F. Croydon of Newchurch. Rates cash straight to Westminster. While I totally agree with Ed Blake from County Press Letters from the 20th of the 1st, that Ventnor Haven and Cheetah Marine bring in valuable business to Ventnor, I feel that I must point out his own inaccuracy in that their business rates don't go to the Isle of Wight Council. Mrs Thatcher took away all control of business rates from local councils back in 1989. The Isle of Wight Council still has to collect business rates, but they have to pass them on to the Treasury for central government to use as they see fit. Unfortunately, business rates don't stay on the island but go to Westminster.
Bembridge Council far from transparent, says Alexander Steen of Bembridge. Alastair Steen of Bembridge. You reported in the County Press of the 20th of January, Bembridge Parish Council had put on hold a decision to sell a landmark property in the village, the Captain Stan's building, after receiving a petition of 1,300 names. The decision to sell would have affected the 3 businesses being run from the building, had an impact on business footfall in the village, and meant the loss of a much-loved community asset. At the same meeting, the council, quite correctly, agreed to pursue a community asset order on the Lloyds Bank building 20 yards away, which Lloyds is leaving in April, preventing it being redeveloped for residential use. At the same time, however, the parish council sought planning permission for its own building for residential use. The council's decision-making process is highly questionable. It appears that a subcommittee was set up without the knowledge of the community in early spring last year, chaired by an unelected resident, which was given decision-making powers and a significant budget. It effectively took the decision in May 2016 to sell the building. The meetings and their decisions were never publicised and minutes never published, so the community was never aware. When asked to supply the minutes, the council initially refused. The contents of the meetings were never discussed in full council, and the decision was formally voted on and approved in October. Having made the decision, the council then held a public consultation, which appears to have been an utter sham. There's not been an actual council election for 11 years in Bembridge, as all seats were filled unopposed with subsequent co-options. This will not happen in May. Anyone wanting to know more about this should access the Bembridge Community Notice Board and Open Bembridge Facebook forums.
And now a letter from Frederick Mew of Cowes. Strange logic. I'm just an ordinary Joe, so can someone explain the logic to me for having just one hospital when we are grossly overpopulated and over-trafficked? And yet, when we had far fewer living here, we had 5 hospitals: East Cowes, Newport, Ryde, Shanklin and Ventnor. What kind of brain power is that?
And on to looking back. And we've got 50 years ago. It was a melancholic scene at Coppins Bridge as another island rail landmark disappeared. The viaduct bordering the river, which had once kept the line safe from flooding, was demolished by the Isle of Wight County Council. Because of the proximity of houses and shops, the use of explosives was ruled out. So it was the tried and tested method of a wrecking ball, which erased this small slice of island history. Yes, I think I can remember those arches. Anyway, on we go. 100 years ago, January 27th, 1917. The island was facing numerous food production problems. It was reported that pig keeping was unviable because of the cost of feed, and the availability of land was worthless without sufficient labour or manure. To make matters worse, sparrows were rapidly becoming a problem as they stripped crop fields bare. The same was said for crows, wood pigeons, jays, stoats and foxes, and it was advised that clubs be formed to tackle their numbers. Not nice in the middle of the First World War. And 75 years ago, January 31st, 1942, a report from the Special Committee for Harvest Camps stated that schoolboy labour proved invaluable in the previous year's harvest and said that attention should be paid so that it might be fully utilised again. And the recently formed Help for Russia Committee held a dance in St Faith's Hall in Cowes. More than 100 people attended, raising £11, £700 in today's money, for beleaguered Soviet Union soldiers resisting the Nazi invasion on the Eastern Front. And in the same edition, with tomato cultivation finally set to become widespread on the island after months of setbacks, 1942 promised to be a bumper year. However, the rise in acreage reserved for outdoor tomato crops raised a different problem, with the potential shortage of plants to fill the space. And 50 years ago, January 21st in 1967, the January meeting of the UFO Society took place in the Unitarian Church Hall in Newport. The meeting was addressed by Anthony Durham of Cambridge University Group for the investigation of UFOs. I'll translate that. Unidentified flying objects. Mr. Durham stressed the need for a scientific approach to UFO investigation and through experiments demonstrated how 95% of sightings could be explained, leaving the remainder a genuine mystery worthy of the Society's time.
Okay, and now 25 years ago, on the edition of January the 24th, 1992, fossil remains of an iguanodon found at Bryston Bay were thought to be the oldest ever discovered on the island. Martin Simpson, with fellow paleontologist John Wince, discovered the remnants of the giant lizard's left leg, pelvis, ribs and vertebrae. Large quantities of superglue were used as part of an unorthodox means of keeping the fossil intact during extraction. The beast would have roamed around 120 million years ago and been 25 feet tall. And as biting winds swept across Sandown Bay, 10 gravity-defying engineers worked to secure vulnerable sections of the public footpath by Battery Gardens. The footpath, a victim of corrosion, needed extensive work to shore up a vulnerable 2-mile stretch. Rather than using scaffolding, the contractor opted for a little more dramatic approach of hiring abseilers. Finally, 10 years ago, on January 26, 2007, a Cowes woman pressed the Town Council to launch a case for an inquiry into unfair competition on cross-Solent ferry travel. The anonymous commuter even compiled a dossier of evidence which she sent to each town councillor. From the study conducted by her and her fellow passengers, it was said islanders were being outpriced for getting to the mainland. And also it was reported that over the next 23 years the island would experience the highest population growth of anywhere in the southeast. According to forecasts, the population would rise by more than 40,000 by 2029, an increase of 29%.
And on we go with an article by island historian and author Alan Stroud. Rowdy Night Out at the Island Flicks. Cinema going was once a massive part of life, and the island was no different. TV was still black and white, and even in the early 60s, the island still had 12 cinemas, one in each town, where James Bond and the Beatles could be seen up close and in Technicolor too. What's on at the Flicks was a weekly ritual, bringing the high streets to life with queues around the block. If you missed the film, you'd see it in another town a week later. It was a long way from today's multiplexes and home streaming. TV would, of course, be the undoing of the cinema in most towns. The BBC came to the island in 1954, and a year later, ITV arrived in the London area. By the time ITV came to the island in 1958 in the form of Southern Television, cinema profits were taking a battering, so much so that Southern's major shareholder was none other than the Rank organisation, which had seen the writing on the wall. The King's Cinema, East Cowes, was the first to close in the late 1950s, but for the moment, all was well with the other island picture houses, apart from rowdyism, that is. In October 1960, the county press reported the manager of the Theatre Royal ride stated that apart from rowdyism, the cinema was free of trouble. At the Commodore, the manager said there had been many cases of seats being damaged. The cinema ran a blacklist of people who were not admitted. The manager of the Scala stated that seats had been cut to pieces, lighted cigarette ends were thrown about, and gangs of youths would climb over seats. As the 60s progressed, the island's 12 cinemas began to shrink in number. The first to go was the Theatre Royal in Ryde High Street in May 1961. The cause wasn't falling profits this time, but a spectacular fire. The county press reported the 600-seat cinema closed at 12:25 p.m. and the staff left some minutes later. The fire started shortly after, and soon the building was ablaze from end to end. Burning embers were flung far into the night sky and showered over the town as far as Ryde Pier.
On Saturday morning, the cinema was a smoking mass of rubble. At the front, posters advertised the last film shown, The Rebel, starring Tony Hancock, and on the wall was a poster announcing a forthcoming film, Too Hot to Handle. In August 1961, the Royalty in Cowes was closed. The following year, the Grand in Ludley Street in Newport, on the site of what is now the Travelodge, shut its doors for the last time. 1962 also saw the end of the Regent in Freshwater. Ryde's Scala was renamed the Plaza in October 1965 and closed in 1973. For the Rowdies, the closures meant a different meeting place. In January 1964, regular cinema goer wrote to the county press. Once again, a Saturday evening at a Newport cinema, at which we pay some of the highest prices outside of London, has been ruined by the noise of loudmouth youths and screaming teenage girls. I refer to Saturday's performance at the Savoy. Included in the programme was a film of the Beatles. It was completely ruined by the shouting youths and screaming girls. In 1965, the Rivoli in Sandown took down the silver screen and became a bingo hall. The Rex in Ventnor closed its doors in September 1980. The Savoy in Newport in December 1982. The Queen's in Sandown in September 1985. And the Regal Shanklin in October 1986 all followed. The Medina Newport was renamed Studio One in 1965, then became a Canon Bingo Club from the mid-1980s to 1987, when it closed, to reopen as the Picture Dome in 1994, finally closing in February 2000. Today, only the Commodore survives to keep Cineworld commercial company. We've even lost Pearl and Dean and its distinctive theme tune, Asteroid, from one of those somewhere along the way.
And the Alan Marriott article. Morris was an MP in waiting. Tributes poured in this week to Maurice Barton, political giant of the island, and described by some as the best MP the Isle of Wight never had. Morris, who died last Friday, served on East Cowes Town Council, Medina Borough Council, and as leader of the Isle of Wight Council, with a touch of style. He constantly had the panache to have been an MP. He certainly had the panache to have been an MP, and it was a mystery as to why he never succeeded, Steve Ross, as the Liberal candidate. As a county press colleague for more than a decade or so in the 1980s, when I was a bit of a firebrand myself, and Morris no shrinking violet, I could never resist trying to goad him with some political opinion that I never believed in, but nonetheless knew would get a rise out of him. In those days, the relations between editorial and the highly unionised print room were rather like those between North and South Korea, wary but understanding of each other's way of doing things. So I used to toss the odd verbal grenade over the 38th parallel in the hope of inciting a reaction from Morris and his fellow print room liberals, the late Keith Lacey and Jeff Führer Manners. It succeeded more often than not, and the fireworks would ignite. But it was soon forgotten, and we would return to discussing Manchester City, Manners, Newport Football Club, Lacey, or cricket, Barton. All three of them had their critics inside the CP and outside, but you knew where you were with them. Mr. Manners still pops into my office to fire a volley about the present council. They all had their community at heart and were up for a fight. Maybe that is what's missing from the current independent group, who threw their hats in last week so spectacularly and handed power to the Tory alliance. And let's face it, we know it's not big and it's not clever, but we all love a political bruiser. Morris was certainly that, and Jeff Lumley showed he's not going to indulge in tea and sympathy politics when he took on the world at last week's council meeting. But to be fair, shouting and hollering doesn't get you very far these days, so it could be in the short term. The law enforcement leadership of former cop Dave Stewart will keep Councillor Lumley in check, although he may also have to verbally handcuff the powerful females of the independent group, East Cowes Bad Girls, London, Louisa Hillard, and new group leader Julia Baker-Smith, if he is to keep the keys to the castle past May's election. One thing is for certain, though, it would have been no different in Roy Westmore and Maurice Barton's day.
Now, an article headed "See It This Way or That Way," or after 3 weeks of holding the fort following La Houghton's departure, I have had enough of this writing lark, and you, dear reader, have undoubtedly had enough of my verbal diarrhea. So next week we'll see the dawn of a new era of county press comment. Some said Charlotte would not be easily replaced, and they were right. Instead, I have drafted in a crack team of 8 scribblers to produce a wide range of thoughts and jottings from a number of perspectives. But just like at Christmas, you're not getting all your presents at once. We will unleash the debateful 8 on you 2 at a time, starting next Friday. I hope you'll be served up some tasty morsels of provocation, hefty main courses of thoughtfulness, and more than a few trifles for dessert. But please remember, they will only be opinion. To disagree is your right, and I will welcome your views. Leave hate at the gate and let's just debate.
Is there life after the army? The trials faced by soldiers when they pack away their weapons and return to Civvy Street are well documented. But here, an Isle of Wight ex-squaddie tells how he is helping others meet these challenges. It's an article from Behind the News by Sue Lupton. My name is Jamie Kennedy. 6 years served in the Princess of Wales Royal Regiment. 2008, barely 18, I found myself on the back end of Op Telik in Iraq. And in 2011, aged 21, I was flat on the deck of Afghanistan on Op Herrick with lead wasps whizzing over my head. Right where I wanted to be. Still trying to figure that one out. This is the introduction to Soldier to Civvy, a blog by a former Carisbrooke High student, Jamie, now 26 and living in Freshwater. And he goes on. In 2012, at the age of 22, I decided to jump over the fence to see what colour the grass was. Well, it was more like falling through the fence like a young headless chicken. The aim of my blog is to help those of you who are struggling with the transition from soldier to civvy, hence the title, Soldier to Civvy. As I have experienced the transition from soldier to civvy, I'm still in the trench with you, ladies and gentlemen. I hope to provide guidance, inspiration, and motivation, using real-life experiences and lessons I have learned since leaving the army in 2012.
What is the story behind the blog? I started writing it in October, 4 years after leaving the army. I had stumbled on a blog on a different subject, which gave me the idea. I'm not the sort of person who likes to tell war stories in the pub, but I discovered I was comfortable writing about my experiences. I had struggled to find my feet after leaving the army, and even now, I'm still struggling. I'd like to let other vets know they are not alone. Drug and alcohol problems are quite common among vets. I would like to create a community where vets can share their experiences. Why did you join the army? At the time, it seemed the best career choice. I didn't enjoy school and left at 16 with just 1 GCSE, a D grade in science. I had already signed up at the old Army Careers Office in Pyle Street in Newport.
What are typical problems facing veterans? In the army, you're always told what time to go somewhere, what clothes to wear and what equipment to take. You aren't used to thinking for yourself. Like many veterans, I was very naive, thinking I would get a job easily in Civvy Street. In fact, no one recognises your experience. You're so eager to get out and you think you know best, so it's a big shock when you have trouble getting work. I ended up driving a lorry and doing manual work because I don't have qualifications. I have now established a self-employed property maintenance business and work part-time in a wine bar. Have you had much feedback? I've been bowled over by the reaction. In my own family, my grandparents were shocked to read about my experiences. The guys who served with me have said it has helped them express their problems to their families. I expected about 50 people to read the blog, my comrades and Facebook friends, but have had more than 1,700 readers. My girlfriend, Abby Butchers, who's a student nurse, has been very supportive and proofreads what I write. Writing the blog has been an extraordinary experience.
And now, in Jamie's own words, some edited extracts from the Soldier to Civvy blog. 2006, age 16. Standing alone in a 12-man room after my parents ditched me at the gates of Harrogate Army Foundation College. I was standing with a name badge pinned to my chest with J.S. Kennedy in a bold black font. My initials actually being J.R. Kennedy. My young, naive mind was wondering about the possible misprint. A Scottish corporal entered the room. My first words were, "Excuse me, the name on my tag is wrong." This short but terrifying corporal looked at me as if he wanted to punch me. Hesitantly, I continued, "The name tag says J.S. Kennedy when in actual fact my initials are J.R. Kennedy." The angry corporal replied with, "The J.S. stands for Junior Soldier, you effing mong." 2011, aged 21. Sitting in a small mud room in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. As every night, the multiple team commanders would gather to receive debrief reports. On November the 20th, 2011, we received a report which would trigger many emotions. Private Thomas C. Lake had been killed. Although I never had the pleasure of meeting Thomas Lake, he was still a soldier of my regiment. The pot of emotions began to stir. The sadness, the bitterness, anger, and the shock of reality. There are three things that I usually think about in those 2 minutes of respectful silence on Remembrance Day. The first and foremost being Private Thomas C. Lake. Secondly, I think about November the 11th, 2011, the 11th of the 11th of the 11th, the most memorable day of my life. A company conducted a large offensive operation in Loy Mande, Afghanistan. My multiple moved out at 0500 hours under the cover of darkness. There was a large explosion 200 metres to my west. The chilling words on the radio, "Man down, man down, man down." Stephen Bainbridge of the Black Watch 3rd Battalion, the Royal Regiment of Scotland, had initiated a pressure plate IED, an improvised explosive device. He lost both legs and sustained other wounds, but survived. Following the extraction of Stephen Bainbridge, my call sign, my team, was tasked to exploit further Taliban compounds. We led our patrol right into the killing area of a Taliban ambush. I took a massive rate of incoming effective enemy fire. Initially, we couldn't even return fire. We all just scrambled into the closest ditch. I couldn't believe I hadn't been hit. I wasn't even sure that I hadn't been hit. I took a deep breath before kneeling up to return fire in the general direction of the enemy. I sprayed the whole tree line until the magazine of my rifle was empty. I then took cover in a gully. Thanks to the men of my call sign who suppressed the Taliban, the firing had come to a stop, and I was somehow still alive. You can follow Soldier to Civvy on Facebook or visit www.soldiertocivvy.com.
And what's on? And psychedelia with a touch of whimsy. Acoustic duo Stupidity will be sharing a selection of esoteric and psychedelic songs with an acid folk edge when they perform at Ventnor Arts Club. Rob Thompson, drums, percussion and vocals, and Julian Wolfries, guitars, keyboards and vocals, will combine traditional song structures and whimsical lyrics with soundscapes, poetry and free-form music, all of which is influenced by and draws on European cabaret, surrealism, English folklore, progressive rock and occasional left-field jazz or ambient elements. The gig next Friday, February 3rd, starts at 8 p.m.
Now news of brass players wanted. White Brass, a small brass ensemble, is looking for new members. The band, which recently lost 3 players due to ill health and age, has had to turn down events because it is short of musicians. A spokesperson said, "We play a mix of swing jazz, traditional and pop music for a variety of community and private events. We have fun and we're relaxed. You are very welcome to join us. White Brass rehearse on Tuesdays at St Mary's Church Hall, Ryde High Street, between 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. To get in contact, email whitebrass@outlook.com. You can find the band on Facebook or call 873 172.
3 of the biggest names in the rock and pop firmament will be rolled out in Newport in March. The Beatles, Bon Jovi and Phil Collins. Don't be put off by the caveat tribute lot, for these acts are critically acclaimed. The tribute act business has soared in recent years, and there's no doubt the standards of bands and their performances have got better and better. So step forward the upbeat Beatles, Bon Jovi Experience, and finally, Phil Collins.
Okay, now killer of a comedy. The black comedy The Lady Killers is coming to the Apollo Theatre. Written by American screenwriter William Rose in 1954, The Lady Killers was born from a strange dream he had, where 5 criminals were living in a house with an old lady. The play has since been adapted for the stage by the renowned comic writer Graham Linehan of Father Ted fame. The Lady Killers is the story of a group of would-be bank robbers posing as a musical quintet who rent a room from the upstanding, if rather nosy, pillar of the community, Mrs. Wilberforce. As to be expected, the whole thing quickly descends into a hilarious farce. Performances are at 7:30 p.m. tomorrow, that's Saturday, and Sunday, then again from February the 7th through to the 11th.
And these are the dates of the various things on at Medina Theatre. Big Hug is a concert by local artists in support of island charities on Saturday 4th of February at 7:30 p.m, tickets at £18. Then there's Barbara Dixon in Good Company, Sunday 5th of February at 7:30 p.m, tickets at £32.50. The White Strollers present Jack and the Beanstalk at Medina Theatre on Saturday the 18th and 25th of February at 2:30 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. On Sunday 19th of February at 2:30 p.m. Tickets are £8 or £7 for under 14 years. Upbeat Beatles, back by popular demand, on Friday 3rd of March at 7:30 p.m, tickets £17. The Bon Jovi Experience, Saturday 4th of March at 7:30 p.m, tickets £17. And finally, Phil Collins, on Saturday 11th of March at 7:30 p.m, tickets £19.
Okay, now we have news of New Moon, who are presenting a rock and roll and 60s night at Lower Hyde in Shanklin on Saturday, February the 11th. Tickets cost £10 and can be got from Ladies' Realm shops in Ryde, Sandown and Shanklin, and from Bernard's Shoes in Newport. All profits from the live CD are donated to the Earl Mountbatten Hospice, available now in Earl Mountbatten Hospice shops, priced £10, and you can catch them on Facebook at newmoon.iow.
And finally, chance for young musicians. Calling all young island musicians. Talented young classical musicians are being given the chance to take a step towards excellence thanks to the West White Arts Association, WWAA, bursary scheme. The WWAA is seeking applicants aged between 11 and 18 who are resident on the island and who would like some financial help with buying instruments, the cost of lessons or transport to lessons. We're keen to encourage talented local music students who aspire to the excellence of the young concert artists who perform for us but who need financial support to further their studies. Application forms for bursary are available from the website www.westwhitearts.co.uk and must be returned by February 25th. Applicants will be informed by March 3rd if they have been invited for audition. Auditions for those candidates who have been selected will be held at Freshwater Memorial Hall on Sunday, March the 19th, from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m.
Okay, and finally, we have news of a gig by Ireland singer-songwriter Paul Armfield, who captivated a full house at the first of this year's Dimbola at 8 events last Friday. Organiser David Ballard said, "There were some first-time visitors to Dimbola Lodge and a few regulars who had not heard Paul before. We were all impressed with his inventive storytelling and music and look forward to hearing him again at A Day at the Bay in October. The next Dimbola at 8 is on St Patrick's Day, Friday, March the 17th, when blues and soul man Laurie McVeigh extends Celtic hands across the sea. Details of events at Dimbola are at www.dimbola.co.uk.
And that's all we have time for. So it's goodbye from Sonara.
And goodbye from Stephen. Goodbye.
This is a download from the BBC. For more information and our terms of use, go to www.bbc.co.uk/in touch. Good evening. Halve the gap between disabled and non-disabled people currently in a job. Increase specialist help to disabled people looking for work. Invite people to tell their stories and send in their suggestions about how to make things better on the job front. Well, you wouldn't want to argue with any of that, would you? It's all in the government's Green Paper on work, health and disability. But just before you get too excited, there's not much in this document specifically about blind and partially sighted people. And the RNIB continues to say that the number of visually impaired people of working age without a job is double that of disabled people generally, around 1 in 4. So tonight we're going to look at what this actually means, what this Green Paper could do for us, and more specifically we're going to dig into these statistics about blind people and work, ask whether it's actually tougher now to get a job if you're blind, and if the answer is yes, why might that be so? Let's start with Jeff Phimister. Now, he is the RNIB's campaigns officer. And Jeff, you're keen that blind and partially sighted people should actually take up this invitation to give their views. So what's your reaction to the Green Paper? Essentially, what does it say?
It presents to us opportunities and also potential hazards. We see it as a snakes and ladders thing, really. The intention behind this of improving the employment prospects of blind and partially sighted people is obviously something we're very keen on and very pleased to see. Some of it's a bit vague, some of it's going along directions where we think the resources might not be there, and we think there may be some problems with the benefits issues. They lay a lot of emphasis on the role of work coaches in job centres in future who would have some kind of specialist backup. We're a bit worried about that. We think that might be too generalist. We think that it's important that the support that disabled people get, the blind and partially sighted people get, should be impairment specific, it should be high quality, it should be very focused on the individual.
So why, 20 years after anti-discrimination legislation, are we still doing so badly in the job market? Because most people, I think, would argue that if it is 1 in 4, that's not a very good performance.
No, it's not. It's concerning, and there are a number of factors behind this, I'm sure. One of the key things, it seems to us, and the Green Paper does discuss this, is employers' attitudes, in that they maybe don't know how much disabled people, how much visually impaired people can do. The position has been transformed by technology, apart from anything else. The assistive technology means that there is so much potential there, and employers maybe aren't up to speed on that and don't realise. Tied in with that is the whole issue of employment support, but the proper specialist support being available.
Because when I first came on the scene a long, long time ago, there were things like blind persons resettlement officers. They don't really exist anymore, do they?
Now, there's been a move away from the sort of specialist support that people ought to have, I think, and we made this point twice in recent times to the Work and Pensions Select Committee.
Right. Now, the Department of Work and Pensions told us in a statement that the number of disabled people in work has risen by 600,000 over the past 3 years. They do say they know there's much to do, but they say we offer a wide range of tailored and effective support through programmes such as Access to Work, which has a specialist visual impairment team. Our Work and Health Green Paper sets out what must be done, and we want employers and disabled people to tell us what they think. Would you want to argue with any of that?
Well, the intentions are good. We'll be putting in some specific supplementary evidence on Access to Work, which we think is an excellent scheme in principle, but where we think there are lots of problems on the ground. We do very much want people to put their views to the DWP. We've talked to DWP officials and we're in no doubt that they're genuine in their intention to try and make progress here, but will the resources be there for the kind of specialist support that's needed?
Now, let me just talk to you a bit about these stats. The RNIB statistics, which you quote, suggest we're doing much more poorly than the government's own figures would suggest. What's the basis of your 1 in 4 figure, which seems to have been the same for years and years and years?
Well, our research people tell me it's actually gone down. It used to be about 10 years ago, it was about a third rather than 26%, which it now seems to be. This is based on a relatively recent survey, 2015, the My Voice survey, which is a survey of 1,200 blind and partially sighted people of working age, and our research people tell me that this is statistically significant, so we can rely on it, and who am I to argue?
Well, I want to stay with the stats for a minute, because after all, to solve a problem you do surely need to know the size of it. Now, the only statistic specifically dealing with visual impairment given to us by the Department of Work and Pensions comes from something called the Labour Force Survey, and that says that 57% of people of working age who self-report having problems with seeing are in work, which does sound much higher than the figure that Jeff's just given us. Now, we've asked Roy Sainsbury, who's Professor of Social Policy at the University of York, to take a look at these figures. So, Roy, what are we to make of them? Can you give us some context?
Yes, indeed, Peter. The survey that Jeff Phimister just referred to was based on a sample of people who are registered as blind or partially sighted with local authorities. And that makes a big difference, because the Labour Force survey, the figure that the DWP were using, is a completely different way of sampling disabled people.
And does that mean that quite a lot of people on that survey would have what we would call quite good sight, maybe, wouldn't really get anywhere near registration?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a much, much bigger group of people who are self-reporting as having difficulties with seeing. If you just had difficulties with seeing, the chances of you actually qualifying as registered blind or partially sighted are pretty small, actually. So it's much, much bigger. So the two figures aren't necessarily contradictory. And because people who actually register and succeed in registering are always at the more severe end of sight limitation, then I'd expect their employment rate to be lower.
So how much do you think we can really say about what we know about the numbers of blind and partially sighted people who are without work, and how does it compare with the past? Do we know that?
We do a bit. This way of measuring from the Labour Force survey has been going on for some time, and they've changed the way of defining people with sight loss a couple of times in the last 20 years. So we've got really good comparable figures over the last 3 years. And in that period, the disability employment gap has gone down from 33% to 32%. Not very much, but it's in the right direction. If you compare that way back in 1998, when we've got some earlier figures, slightly different way of measuring it, but it was above 40%. So over the longish term, we're seeing movements in the right direction.
Right. Stay with us. We'll come back to you on that. Let me bring in Caroline Stanfield, who is the Assistant Manager of Disability Services at the University of the Arts. And she's also worked for the RNIB, recruiting blind people as trainees, both within the organisation and with other employers, and has had various other jobs in the employment area. You think the climate is particularly tough at the moment. Why?
I think the climate has got consistently tougher. I first worked in the employment sector 30 years ago for RNIB, and I think that in those days people learned a skill, they learned it in depth, they were able to promote themselves with that skill, go into jobs, start off on the job ladder. And, nowadays they have to be multi-skilled. You have to be able to do everything to be an administrator. And some of those things, there will be huge barriers to doing.
Because some people thought that was limiting, didn't they? I mean, you're talking about very specific jobs that were thought to be good for blind people. Physiotherapy was one, clerical jobs was another. There were forms of light engineering, and there's also sheltered employment, of course. And people seem to think that by getting rid of that, we became more inclusive. And part of the community, as it were.
So having those as professions that all blind and partially sighted people went into possibly was limiting. What was limiting was people's expectations. But those jobs existed. Somebody was doing them. Somebody had to do them. If it wasn't a visually impaired person, it would be someone else. So just the way that work is organised generally, that change means that there are fewer people who can offer skills at the same level as the general population who are blind or partially sighted. Right. There are some, and there are some jobs in which there would still be that comparability, but not as many, and not in areas that you could particularly pinpoint, like physiotherapy, computer programming, etc.
But didn't we think that technology, which Jeff mentioned, was actually going to be the answer to that? That diversity in the labour market was going to be good for blind people, because there would be so many more things we could do.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that many of the barriers to employment now are around technology. Whilst technology for blind and partially sighted people has improved immeasurably alongside the technology that's changed generally, the barriers now are to systems, networks, huge kind of complex systematised programming ways of doing things that just weren't the case in the past, and we could keep up. I mean, I always feel that in 1987, for example, you could take a screen reader, plug it into any computer, and it would work. There hasn't been anything like that since. You just can't walk up to any computer. I work in a university. We've got a huge network, and I can't. I have to have a specific machine rather than, just log on anywhere to the network, unlike all my colleagues who could just walk into any site and do that.
You're not boring us, but I think your dog's snoring, so that's probably happened before. I want you to listen to something, because someone else who's been speculating on why anti-discrimination laws haven't solved the problem of worklessness is one of our regular columnists. It's Mike Lambert. This is his experience of the changing workplace culture. His words have been voiced by one of our producers.
Back in the 80s, when I applied for my first teaching post, the situation seemed relatively straightforward. I had 2 relevant degrees, a qualification in teaching, and a belief that I was embarking on a career I could both cope with and, in time, be good at. Of course, I knew that being blind involved some additional challenges. There were the more mundane parts of the work, like marking, keeping student records and registers, that I'd always be much slower at. But that was something I was prepared to shoulder, and certainly it wasn't decisive. If anyone at my job interview had raised this as a problem, I would have pointed out the many qualities that made me an excellent candidate. I was an expert in my subject. I was able to convey a love of language and literature to students. I was conscientious and hard-working. But then, the tide turned, and slowly at first things began to change. More students per class, more teaching hours per week, and more teaching weeks per year. Nobody liked the changes, but they were having a disproportionately negative impact on me as a disabled employee. Every change emphasised those mundane, quantitative parts of the job at which I was necessarily much slower. Endless new paperwork and extra marking, which already took me twice as long as non-disabled colleagues, began to consume my weekends. Eventually, it was this increasing workload that persuaded me to change direction and become a disability coordinator. Once again, I was very clear that I had the qualities necessary to do a good job, and for a time, that was what happened. It took me a while to realise that all I'd actually done was move my stall a little higher up the beach, and that the tide of change was still heading my way. By then, we were well into the era of bums on seats. Every new student arrived fully costed, and it wasn't long before some ingenious bean counter devised a formula for standardising and pricing the support requirements of disabled students. Once I had to account for what I was doing every hour of the day, it was possible to say that I was less productive than non-disabled colleagues. The times I'd had a positive impact on the lives of young people and the qualities that made me good at my job never counted in the numerical data that increasingly dictated our work. Once we had departmental targets, I felt acutely aware that colleagues might think I wasn't pulling my weight. And once reorganisation and job cuts became the norm, a cooperative and supportive workplace became racked by rumour and rivalry. Of course, education isn't the only area to have suffered in this way. The same spirit-crushing regime of quantification, monitoring and targets has affected many other areas of work, and nowhere's been harder hit than the public sector, where in an earlier, more supportive and cooperative era, many blind and disabled people found employment. We've moved from a qualitative to a quantitative work culture. It no longer matters whether a job's well done, just as long as it can be shown that the maximum number of units were processed in the minimum possible time. Personally, it's a change of culture I don't much like. It devalues what's good about me, and more important, it penalises those of us in the workplace for whom speed never was and never will be our strongest suit.
Mike Lambert's ideas. Caroline Stanfield, as someone who's been working for just about as long as Mike has property, I just wonder, it's a slightly different point to the one you were making, but how much does it chime with your experience?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think, Mike has sort of nailed it, really. That's exactly what has happened. We are all being counters now. We are looking at quantitative measures as well as, and usually and often, instead of the qualitative, being good at something, being able to excel. I think it's very close, actually, in a way, to what I was saying.
Jeff Fimster, if it's a problem like that, if it's almost systemic, that's a difficult thing to solve, isn't it? And isn't that beyond you and beyond the Department for Work and Pensions?
I'd say two things about that. One is that I'd want to counter that with a little bit of optimism. I've worked in the advice field for many, many years, and back in the 1970s, 1980s, you saw very few blind or partially sighted welfare rights advisors because you had to use huge books with hundreds of pages of legislation and so on. You had to be able to read them. Whereas now you see lots of blind and partially sighted advice workers because the technology means that they don't need to read these huge books, and that makes a difference. So I think it's a more nuanced position, perhaps. But what this says to me is the need for very individualised, very tailored support for people, both in the workplace and in the employment support field.
Right, and that's your big point, more tailored help. I want to bring in Roy Sainsbury. I mean, you study social policy. Historically, how effective have governments been in influencing employment rates amongst disabled people in general and blind people in particular?
Well, we don't know very much about blind people in particular, unfortunately, but I mean, governments since about 1997 onwards have been really trying to tackle this problem. And we've seen various schemes. We started with the New Deals for everybody, moved on to Pathways to Work, and now we're in the era of the Work Programme. And all of them, you can probably say, they've done okay. But they haven't done very okay. They've improved employment rates for people out of work slightly, but not enough to make a really big dent in the unemployment figures. And
so does this Green Paper suggest that they will do more okay with this or not?
I suspect that everything in the Green Paper is positive, it's in the right direction, but it's going to have very, very little effect on the disability employment gap. We've seen the disability employment gap consistently at sort of 30 percentage points for the last 3 decades. And all the New Deals and Pathways to Work and work programmes has really not made an impression on that. So I suspect that for all the good intentions of the Green Paper, it's a missed opportunity to do something quite radical to help improve the disability employment gap.
Well, there's so much more to discuss, but we've done as much as we can. Just, Jeff, you tell people what you can about how they can register their views with the Department for Work and Pension.
Yes, well, we're very keen that people should put in their own submissions, and if you're doing it online, copy us into what you're saying so we can use it in our submission. And you can do that by going onto the RNIB website, where there is a link to an action where you can
write into the DWP and copy us in, or you can phone our campaigns hotline. And I think, PC, you're going to have the details of
There
that.
will be links and that phone number on our website. There'll also be information including that telephone number. Jeff Phimister, Caroline Stanfield and Professor Roy Sainsbury, thank you all very much indeed. And as well as telling the DWP, you can tell us what you think. What's your work experience been like, and who should do what to improve things? You can call our action line on 0800 044 044 for 24 hours after the programme. You can email in touch at bbc.co.uk, or you can contact us on Twitter by using #InTouch. From me, Peter White, producer Cheryl Gabriel and the team. Goodbye.